Welcome to another episode of Beyond Data Management Podcast, powered by HS GovTech. I'm your host, Cameron Garrison. Thanks for stopping in and joining us today. It would be a really weird thing and just would not make sense in a podcast devoted to environmental health issues and environmental health professionals around the country to not do an in-depth conversation with our guest today. He is one of the thought leaders and luminaries in environmental health. And it's really going to be an honor to have this conversation here today. The executive director of NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association. I think most of you in the audience are very familiar with the amazing work they've done. And he has also done a lot in his seat here that's taken NEHA further than it's ever been, including doubling the membership and a lot of other exciting things. So it is a real honor to welcome virtually, I believe, from Orlando, Florida, Dr. David Dyjack, the executive director of NEHA. I count him as a friend. I've known him for a long time. Dr. Dyjack, it is an honor for you to join us, and thanks so much for coming in here today.
Likewise, and it is hot here in Orlando, so let's have a hot discussion today.
All right. Yeah, it's 'tis the season. My family, actually, we have a trip planned there this summer, and inevitably as the kids get older, as in out of college and into a career, it's hard to plan a trip, and we are landing smack dab in July, right before NEHA. So I'm going to have to, yeah.
Wow.
So I'll have to stay really hydrated, because then from Orlando to Phoenix, July is going to be a hot month.
Yeah, it'll be hot and wet, humid, and then hot and dry. So you're going to get both extremes.
Yep. Yeah. And the dry heat, it is different, but it's still hot. There's so much that we'll probably wander around and talk about today, but you have literally been around the world. One of the things I think is so interesting is the perspective that you're able to bring, because you've been around the world as a doctor of public health. So maybe for some of the few folks maybe in the audience that aren't familiar with your background and how you evolved to where you are today, maybe just talk a little bit about your background and some of the work you did prior to becoming the director at NEHA that equipped you for all that you're doing today.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. And sadly, I can't say when I was a young man I had a specific plan. Like a lot of people, I walked into public health kind of backwards. I went in through the back door in the early 80s, focused on asbestos. We used to call that white gold. And I was blessed to work with some very inspired people, some really bright folks who asked me to elevate my game. And the impression I have of the importance of mentors, I just can't overstate that. I was just really fortunate to work with individuals who pushed me quite a bit. I spent my first 4 years or so collecting samples, analyzing data, reporting findings, and wouldn't trade that for any other experience I've had throughout my career. Actually working in the field, not with a suit and tie, but with a hard hat and steel-toed boots, taught me a lot. I worked with some tough characters. I worked in offshore drilling. I've worked in coal mining and copper mining in the Andes, underground coal mines, and all of those experiences really amalgamated into a deeper appreciation for people from red states, people from blue states, people from purple states, and countries all around the planet. And so my formal background is really in sampling and analysis. I went on to get a master's degree at the University of Utah, a doctorate in public health at the University of Michigan, spent some time in China doing research and working with the Shangli Oil Company in Shandong province. Was recruited into academia, migrated to California, spent the better part of 2 decades there before heading back east to work for NACCHO, then ultimately for NEHA. And Cameron, I can't believe it. It's been 10 years. 2 weeks ago, I will have worked and had the privilege of working at NEHA and with environmental health professionals.
That was
around the country.
Fast 10 years, because it doesn't feel like it, does it?
Oh my gosh, where did that? So I sound like my grandparents, right? It's like,
yeah.
As you get older, time goes faster. Well, I used to poo-poo them, and now I'm like, yeah, they were wise. I was the one who was foolish.
It's a thing, and I think, and I could just be being like our grandparents. But I feel like even with technology, it's making it even faster than it was for them. There's so many demands on time and things, but the last 10 years have been just a blur. You've done a lot, though, in those 10 years. Well, actually, first of all, before we do that, did you say you were in a coal mine in the Andes?
So I was in the copper mines in
Copper.
the Andes. I was in coal mines, underground coal mines, subsurface coal mines in Illinois. I worked throughout drilling, refining, and storage throughout Texas, Louisiana, and the Gulf Coast. I did some work for Saudi Aramco after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I mean, it goes on and on. And it
Wow.
is really those practical experiences at the hyper local level. It doesn't get more local than an underground coal mine, to be honest
Yeah.
with you, and what you learn and how you're forced to embrace people who think differently, who act differently, who perceive risk differently. I mean, I've just been so fortunate to have had those individuals spend time with me and say, dude, you're approaching this the wrong way. Think about it this way. And as long as you're open to those kinds of experiences and are committed to reflect and learn from them, there's no end to what this career can offer a person. I'm so blessed to have found environmental health many years ago.
It, that's a huge contrast there, isn't it, between the people in an underground mine and the town that a lot of times revolves around those mines and the upper echelons of like EPA, CDC, and FDA, right? There's a culture to a degree gap to overcome or deal with there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, how much time do we have? I mean, that is so. So thank you for opening that door. You know, if I'm famous for anything over the last 10 years, it's for saying environmental health is profoundly local, and and it is what happens in your bathroom, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, in your schoolyard, in your playground, in your local beach, your local recreational facilities, hotels and spas and swimming pools. And that is where the action is. It is at the local level. And at least it's been my experience that folks who didn't take the time to collect samples, to analyze them, and to work with their colleagues, and let's say in the extraction industries, they do themselves a disservice because when they get to the upper echelons of FDA or CDC or EPA and they don't really understand local communities, and I'm not saying I do, I'm just saying I'm blessed with having spent some time with them. Uh, I think you can easily make decisions that are not grounded in where people live and work and play. And I see this all the time. And I'm like, I just want to scream out loud, what are you thinking about? This isn't going to work. Have you ever been to Kentucky? Have you ever been to South Dakota? Right? Have you ever been to rural Texas? Have you ever been to one of the outlying islands in Hawaii? What you're talking about isn't going to work. But at the same time, we're trying to thread and piece together programming that helps, every U.S. resident to live a life, their fullest possible life. And that means working with people who may be misguided at times.
Yeah, I love that. You should get some t-shirts. I don't think bumper stickers are that much of a thing anymore, but whatever the equivalent is now, EH is profoundly local. It is so true. And it's also profoundly personal at the local level, right? I was talking with someone recently and, in the food safety program, for example, you're talking about a very intimate thing, something that you are trusting a perfect stranger to prepare something that you're going to ingest into your body. And, environmental health has a huge role in regulating and keeping that safe. But every other example that you just listed is very intimate and personal as well. The quality of your water, the safety of your child's daycare, the sanitation there. I'm Cameron Garrison. You've been watching the Beyond Data Management podcast powered by HS
So
GovTech.
I
If you
applaud
don't
you,
mind
Cameron,
and
and let me
enjoying
tell
the
you why.
content,
You
please
just
take a moment
used the
to
I
like
word
and
not once but
subscribe.
twice. Okay,
Thank you so
intimate.
much for your support. Now
I
back to the
used
video.
to describe environmental health as an intimate profession for the reasons you just articulated. It's the water you bathe your child in. It's the formula that you may prepare and put into their mouth. It's the food that your child eats. What is more intimate than that
Yep.
to somebody that you really care for and love? And so I completely agree with you. This is an intimate profession. And whenever I mention this, particularly to people I work with, they're like, don't talk like that because their mind
Really?
goes somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Oh. So I don't.
But it's so I've always liked it because I find it to be very descriptive because where their mind goes something else, ingesting something from a stranger into your body it is intimate, right? I think it's just so appropriate to describe it that way because it's up there with the other things.
Right. So I applaud you. Thank you so much for describing it that way. I'm now going to use you as a crutch. I'm going to say I'm not the only one
That's right. You have
who
company.
speaks this way, right?
There's at least two
There's
of
my
us out there.
counterpart, Cameron, here, right? He gets it. He gets it.
We try it. I learn something every day, which is the humbling but exciting thing is there's always more to learn. Where have we gone wrong? So you said something at the very beginning where you said you kind of came into it backwards. And what's really interesting is the majority of people we talk to, that's so true. Even like we talked to Steve from AFDO, and he was on the political side and not at all a public health guy. And a lot of directors, even at fairly good sized departments at the local agency level, were literally thought up till like the end of college that they were going to do something else. So for something that is so intimate, so important for public health, and just the criticality is unarguable, why is it so obscure? And why do so few people actually know about it? Do we have a PR problem, a marketing problem? But there is an issue of obscurity, right? And I think it's borne out by the fact that a lot of the leaders in the space now stumbled into it by accident.
So I'm biased. So let me share that with you. I think that's fair to disclose that up front. I spent 18 years, including 4 years as dean, working in a school of public health. And I still do site visits for the Council on Education for Public Health. It's referred to as CEF for those that are in the university settings. And what I learned in 18 years at an accredited school of public health and since as, let's say, a site visitor, is that academics are rewarded for being experts on the head of a pin. And they burnish their careers and their reputations based on being able to advance hypotheses that, because of the way funding historically has been provided, just becomes, the questions become smaller and smaller and smaller. So when someone like Dave Dyjack or Cameron goes to school, we're rubbing shoulders with professors who don't see the big picture. They are not incentivized to see the big picture. They are not incentivized to see systems in public health. What they're incentivized to do is to be experts on the head of a pin. The system works perfectly to produce the types of outcomes that we've had to date. And that is brilliant people who are just hyper narrowly focused. And as you know, in your own career, that's not the way public health is. It's messy, it's interdependent, it's interprofessional, it's community-based. There's a lot of slow going and a lot of variables that you can't control, like politics, for example, that all play a role in this. Many of those confounders don't exist in the laboratory universe. You can control all those, the temperature, you can control the relative humidity, you can control the vapor pressure, you can control all those things, where public health is much more, in my opinion, it's much more complex. And so most professors are not in the business of promoting the profession. Their interest is in promoting their research. And I think that's where the fundamental disconnect is.
Hi, I'm Cameron Garrison. You've been watching the Beyond Data Management podcast powered by HS GovTech. If you don't mind and are enjoying the content, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for your support. Now back to the video. Well, I think your bias actually nailed it on the head. That is, I can't think of even a counterpoint on that. And also, too, I love that you mentioned controlling variables in a controlled setting like a lab, because the other thing about public health in the wild is, something happens and it changes everything, right? I think back to just 2019, and I don't think anybody in the public health world could have imagined what was about to descend on them. And so it is very messy, right? Because things that seem far away, half a world away, can suddenly become a thing that upends your entire life.
Well, I am not the Dark Lord, and this is not Harry Potter, but there are some pretty dark things happening around the world as it relates to human health and the environment that I think we need to be paying attention to. This is my concern in the current state of the US, is we may be paying attention to the wrong things.
Really?
So
what's brewing out there? So when you're an optimistic guy, right? And so, but when you're thinking deeply and maybe not so optimistic, what's troubling you?
So screwworms, Google it. Okay. Screwworms, we eradicated from this country decades ago. And for a bunch of different reasons, they're making their way back up north through Mexico en route to the United States. If my friends from the USDA are listening in right now, their blood is starting to boil, because what they'll say is there's no screwworms in the US, but they are clearly on their way back. What this will mean to the agribusiness, what this will mean to pet owners, these flies lay their eggs, and then their larvae hatch in any open wounds. So if you take one of your bovine, your cow, and you put a tag in their ear, and it creates a little cut there, a screwworm fly can deposit an egg, and then those larvae begin to eat away at the flesh of that animal. And
Wow.
That's an example. That's just one example. Okay, so let me give you another one that's directly related maybe to the people listening in today. I attended a mosquito control, a vector control conference in Florida just maybe a month or 6 weeks ago. And somebody from the state presented a map of dengue transmission
What?
in Florida. And they put the slide up that showed the cases like in the last year or two. And then they moved on to the next slide. And I caught them this is a true story. I caught them at the break, and I was like,
they just skipped over it.
You know, what you just showed was dengue fever is now established in the state of Florida. Now, I was in a group of 5, you know what the breaks are like, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's drinking their coffee, and these people started blushing. They're like, because the governor, the way that works in the state is there's something called a clade. It's the type, it's the consistency of the organism, if you will. Because the clades are not identical in the different dengue outbreaks in the state of Florida, there is not the legal position to declare dengue as endemic in the state. But for all practical purposes, when you come to Orlando, sir,
that's terrifying.
So this is what I'm talking about. When folks are like, I don't read about anything. It's like, just because you don't read about it doesn't mean it's not an issue. So I'm not saying you're going to get dengue. What I'm saying is dengue is here.
It's here. And
okay.
And so literally this legal position of the state of Florida, the way they're structured, is nothing to see here because there's variance between the strains.
It's called, there you go. It's referred to as a clade, but one could make the case, well, these are different localized cases. It's not established within the state. But if you look at the state as a whole, just look at the colors. It's like, wait a minute, that's my house. where that is. And I grew up in Maryland. I consider it my home state. There was a locally transmitted case of falciparum, that's cerebral malaria, a couple of summers ago. The world is changing. Aedes aegypti is now overwintering in places it used to not exist at all. And so this is what I mean. It's not just screwworms, it's mosquitoes, it's the distribution of ticks. It is Naegleria showing up in water in places like Minnesota. This is an organism that typically loves warm surface waters. What is it doing in drinking water pipes in the north? So the world is changing really quickly. We need every environmental health professional on their A game to protect the health, the safety, and the economic prosperity of the people that they serve. This is
Yeah.
why this profession is so important. And I can be animated about this, but with good cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I consider myself a pretty astute consumer of news and not just in a silo. You don't pick up on much of this at all, and that's the scary part. We're structurally, so you mentioned like the USDA says, well, they're not here. What's driving that? But if you can clearly see that they're moving closer, why is there this impulse to just say, oh, they're not here, nothing to see here, sit down, be quiet? And I'm not over characterizing.
You're going to get me into trouble.
Yeah. That is my characterization. He did not say that, for the record. But what is, though, that impulse? Because I believe that Senator Cornyn and a group of senators, though, are trying to introduce legislation on this, right? So is that again a headline that was misleading on that front?
So I don't know the legislation that you're referring to. What I am saying is that having a good surveillance system to detect developments overseas benefits the US population.
And so is it a lack of surveillance then? Is it a lack of focus or importance on it that you think is the root of that obliviousness?
I think right now there's a state of disruption. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
Within the authorities that historically have administered these surveillance systems. And that disruption is keeping the established experts in the country, their attention is elsewhere, regretfully.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that actually then, because you went there, and I'm sure you travel more, more than even me, and I travel a lot. And one of the number one questions that I get, and it's almost ineffably unanswerable because it's a gut feel opinion question. They're like, what are you hearing talking to colleagues in other states? And what do you think what's happening here? And are we going to be okay? You know what I mean? It's such an open-ended question. It's difficult to answer, and it calls for speculation. But what of this moment? The CDC, I believe there's headlines they come at us faster than you can even process them. The CDC shut down the line where health departments could call when they are talking about lead remediation or need assistance with that. Like, whole functions have gone up in smoke overnight. And sometimes it's like, oops, we're sorry, and it comes back, and sometimes not so much. What do you make of this moment? How bad is it? Where are we? And then maybe two parts. Optimistically, where do you see potentially a trajectory for course correction and moderation? And then maybe pessimistically, if left unchecked, where does this lead?
Wow. First, let me say clearly that I have personally not seen a plan from the current administration around public health. I have heard about priorities such as additives in food. I've heard conversations about vaccinations and vaccination rates, but and chemicals,
and of course a slogan, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to judge it until someone presents a plan to me that I can cogently review and say, yeah, that makes sense. I believe any administration, if they feel they have the charge through the election to adjust the way the government is administered, I think they won that opportunity to do that. Where I will express some disappointment is the lack of a plan, or at least, no one owes me anything, frankly, except I'm a taxpayer. Then maybe they could owe me a plan on how in the kinds of environmental issues I just described, how those will be addressed moving forward. Because I just became a grandfather, and
Congratulations.
Thanks. I'm no longer thinking about me and my tiny little space. I'm thinking about future generations. It's now a personal, it's not an abstract discussion anymore. It's a personal. So to answer your question, I don't know what the plan is. I have not been presented with that. I will say this, though, and let me be clear. We had the opportunity to sit down with Kyle Diamantis, who's the acting associate commissioner for human foods at the
Oh
FDA,
yeah, yeah.
with the new administration. He was cogent. He was thoughtful. He asked probing questions. He engaged in repartee. He and his staff stayed longer than the appointed time for the NEHA appointment. And I walked away from that interaction deeply impressed with his commitment
Oh, that's really
to,
heartening to
to,
hear.
to food safety. I have not had that conversation at CDC yet. So again, I don't want to prejudge.
That's
Okay,
really fair.
I'm not
Yeah.
prejudiced. I don't want to prejudge.
And in
I
your position, you can't be, right? Like this is, as you said, it's local, but it's also national, and 50 states all vote different ways, and you still have a job to do. So you have to sort of be open minded, don't you?
I think that's the nature of public health, Cameron. You have to, what was it? Aristotle said the sign of an intelligent man is one who can uh, conver- uh, hold opposite views in their mind at the same time and not
Yeah,
lose it, right?
yeah.
I mean, so I'm always listening, and anyone that's participating virtually through this podcast, I'll always listen. I will always listen because there's generally when people talk, there's some gem in there, and I kind of pride myself. But let's listen to see what are they saying, because sometimes what they're literally saying and what they mean are two different things, and I don't want to lose.
Yes.
I don't
Uh,
want to lose that.
We need more of that, especially with the last 8, 9 years that we're in the past 5 with the pandemic where it accelerated. That instinct to write people off, and I actually wasn't thinking we'd talk about this, but it makes me want to ask you. And again, I'm not asking in a political light, but how much did and you're right, but you said something so important, which is you have to be open minded to change. It's the nature of public health. It evolves, things change. How much was some people in some states would describe it as heavy handed, and other states they wouldn't. But how much do you think what we're dealing with now is somewhat of a backlash to the pandemic, where that did get politicized very clearly, but it was evolving. So guidance today may not be the guidance in a week because we've learned more. We have new information. But how much do you think that has coarsened or impacted both the trust in public health from the general population, and how much do you think we're getting some backlash now electorally and in the desire to change from that experience that affected us all in different ways, but it hit us all?
Wow, I wish I had an hour just to talk about this issue because you've asked a lot.
Yeah, and take all
Uh,
the time you want. We don't have a hard stop, so
okay,
feel free
so,
to go into
so
it.
let me begin with an anecdote, and that is I received a phone call from an extended family member who early in the pandemic, and this person is a graduate of a U.S. military academy, highly effective as a business person, a generous donor to philanthropies in his home community. Are you with me? Highly educated.
Yeah, pillar of society kind of guy, right?
Yep. And sent me a picture early in COVID of no reported or few reported cases in Latin America and Africa. And and said to me quite steely-eyed, you see, people who are taking these anti-malarials are protected from COVID.
The ivermectin thing, right?
Yes. Well,
No, that's
no.
that's a different one. The
That's a different one.
yeah,
Right.
the other one,
Chloroquine, hydrochloroquine.
hydrochloroquine. Yes.
Right. And I had to say, wow, this is your family. This is your family.
Yeah.
Listen, and of course I explained the position that the only people taking hydrochloroquine in Latin America or Africa are missionaries and tourists.
True,
And
by the way.
I think I'm largely correct. And that the surveillance systems are such in those places, because I've worked in those places, even if it's there, it's not going to be reported. There's a whole, and and they just poo-pooed me. But I'm not immune to that, Cameron. In my home life, in my immediate family, I'm not immune to those types of questions. And if it's a legitimate, authentic question, I believe we in public health need to engage it in the spirit of it being legitimate.
Yeah.
And not diss it. I believe that there's a couple things in play. One is what we miss in public health is that people make decisions based on relationships. They don't make it based on data.
Hmm.
They make decisions based on what they value and their absorbed identities. Okay, and
It's so true.
what they believe. So their beliefs, their values, and their absorbed identities. And what I think folks also we need to appreciate in public health is that there has been a history in the US, and if you doubt me, you can research it yourself, of anti-intellectualism
Hmm.
in American life. It's and so there's an amalgamation of a bunch of things at play. The most important thing I think we lost sight of during COVID was the real human cost associated with some of the public health decisions were
And
made.
not just death, right? It's much broader than that.
Well, it was people's businesses. I mean, we now have in public health a reputation of tampering with the marketplace and tampering with people's freedoms. And we've got to, until we address those two things as a profession, and we're not about that. Environmental health is not about that. We're not about tampering with individual freedoms or the marketplace. In fact, we're pro freedoms and marketplace.
Yeah, you
Uh,
are. As a matter of fact, the marketplace for most DH departments, the permitting and other fees, like that's how they fund themselves. I couldn't agree with you more, and you're
I,
really hitting on the heart of something here.
yeah, I think it's the people. Listen, I have those degrees we described earlier that I have from those schools. Uh, I never had a lecture on the public. I'm being serious.
Really?
I never had a lecture on what to do with an angry crowd.
Wow.
Or if you're speaking, it's always like, oh, your t-test and your p-value and your chi-square and your slot. Make sure your data is great. But you have to have great data in this profession. But you also need to interpret it. And you need to start where people are at, not where you're at.
Oh, that's
Put
so
your
true.
put your put your pocket protector and your calculator away. And what I learned, and I learned the hard way, because I worked in Southern California, as I mentioned, for almost 2 decades. When I would do community work, I would bring a picture of my wife and children, and I
Hmm.
would sit there, yeah,
Yeah.
to a business meeting, and I would like, this is my wife, she shops over here because we like to get local food from the street.
You humanized
And
yourself.
oh my gosh, because I tried to be Mr. Impressive PhD, and I learned quickly that
Doesn't work.
it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Be yourself, be human, be yourself. But if it's okay, I want to close the conversation on the harm caused by some of these reductions at CDC. I think that there's a real risk for the National Center for Environmental Health. And I would hate for our time to go by and for me to give the impression that we're still waiting for a plan. In my opinion, the clumsy, non-strategic manner in which the National Center for Environmental Health was dissolved is not going to be helpful to the public health
No,
of this nation.
it doesn't make sense, does it?
What NCEH does probably more effectively than any other agency in the world like it acts as the catalyst. Because so many people have access to it, they can process the questions that come up, like indoor air quality, for example. People spend 90% of their time indoors. Where are you right now? Are you indoors or outdoors? Right.
Yeah, right. Like
Okay,
I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, that's why I need to take
okay.
vitamin D supplements because I'm never outside enough.
So my point is the kinds of risks, for example, with wildfires now associated with climate change. And what do we tell people to do? To avoid wood smoke, stay
Yeah.
indoors. Okay. And so those types of very practical questions, where are practitioners going to go? Like, should I be telling my public to stay inside? And if they're inside, what if there's an asthmatic and the smoke particles are penetrating the air filters? I mean, what do we do? What general recommendations are there for the nation? The National Center for Environmental Health, as part of CDC, in my opinion, was the gold standard for environmental health practice in the planet. There is no other agency like it. No offense, it's not NIH, NIEHS. The people who understand practice are NCEH, and
And they're not duplicated, are they, anywhere else?
no, sir. No, sir. Let me be clear. NIEHS does research. NCEH does practice. They help, as we started out this conversation, they help people where they live and they play and they pray and they recreate. We are really setting ourselves up for profound harm. And you mentioned the lead program being dissolved and there's no one to call about lead. That's just an example of, Humpty Dumpty's broken. I hope we can put that back together again because those professionals were underappreciated, high performing, committed Americans.
What if anything, because I know it's on people's minds, is there anything someone, not just an EH, but just general citizen can do? How do you cut through the noise to say, hey, we don't like that? Again, an unanswerable question. I know it's something that NEHA has, you guys work hard on cutting through the noise organizationally, but what constructively could someone do, especially in the EH community, to try to, now I'm not going to say push back or resist, but to try to speak up, maybe is the best way to put it.
So let's take NEHA, for example. What we have now is, like everyone else on the planet, we have a QR code for both the FDA and the CDC, where our members or anybody can just take a picture, activate the QR code, and send a letter to their congressman. And what we see as of this morning, a portion of NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, a portion of them have been brought back to work. The people that work on respirators, for example, in the World Trade Center, for example. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because citizens and the profession said, this is not okay. It's not helpful to the country. And I think that's what we can do. NEHA is doing its part by providing access to our members and anybody else that wants to petition their congressman and say, this is not okay with us. And really, it's through that mechanism. If you don't say anything, then people making these decisions will assume it was okay.
Yes.
And we
yes.
can't let it be okay. Listen, everybody breathes, everybody drinks, everybody eats. Most people recreate. Most people send their children to school if they have children. Are you with me? This is the stuff that
it's intimate. It's intimate.
It's intimate. It's what we have in common. It's what we have in common. So I feel like society, we've been so blessed to have so few public health challenges outside of COVID in recent history that folks don't understand what went into keeping them safe to begin with. And listen,
because you're in the prevention business, right? Which is by definition doesn't make a headline when you win.
So we're working on that. So Cameron, I want you to know that question you're asking, yours truly is working on that right now. I believe it's referred to in my circles as negative space. How do you monetize negative space?
Yeah.
And we're just beginning the process of working on that for the EH profession so that we can say it's not just prevention. Here is the return on investment for that prevention.
Oh, that is overdue. Anything? Sir, is it too early? Or is there anything you can share or give us sneak of? No, sir. Okay.
Well, so listen, I'm in a competitive business just like you. You don't
Yeah.
want to give away your
A
secrets.
hundred percent. I tell you what,
Uh,
let's do this if it's okay. When you're going out into the world with it, will you come back and talk about that?
okay. So hey, I promise you this, and this is this summer. We are releasing a study that will describe a scalable approach to the optimal staffing for a local environmental health program.
Oh, that's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a step. You talked about thought leadership in the beginning of this program. I don't know if that was random or not, but we take that really seriously. So this summer at our annual conference, I have every reason to believe we will be releasing something that every environmental health program in the country can use. When they advocate for a budget or for staffing, the local board of health or the county commissioners may ask, on what basis do you ask for that? And starting this summer, they will have that
Oh, you're
basis.
going to give them the receipts. That's you have done so much and continue to great things with NEHA. And I'll just say for anybody who's watching and you're in the EH community, if you are not a member of NEHA, join. We will put, if it's all right with Dr. Dyjack, we will put a link to be able to join NEHA or to their site in the description of this episode. But anybody who hasn't, and I think most of them probably had, you've doubled membership, I believe, to about 8,000 in your tenure here, right? So, but if there's anybody out there who's not among the 8,000, I would strongly urge you, especially if you're in the community, to join NEHA because it's invaluable for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that plug, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I've worked with NEHA even before you were there, like going back over 20 years, and it's been one of the very enduring organizations. But I'm not just saying this because you're on. I've told people this privately when you have no way to know I've been talking about it. I'm like, yeah, Dr. Dijack's taking it next level. Like your staff, maybe like talk about that. So you don't need to, people need to hear it from me. Your lobbying activities on the, in the Hill or in Washington, I know have really ramped up. Your staff has grown. I know during the pandemic, our company, the company in my day job, HS, was growing, and we had chatted about the challenges of growing in that remote world. And your membership numbers are way up. So, I know you're very proud of the people in the organization and the way you've grown it. Brag about that a little bit and how it has scaled over the last few years.
We have great staff. That's what explains this. And we are committed to the individual practitioner. That is, although we're a national organization, the individual practitioner, I was in West Virginia 2 weeks ago. The individual practitioner in a rural or frontier or pioneer health department is important to us. It's not just the end of the road, it's the last 50 meters. We've done an extraordinary amount of work in the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands and continue to do that right now. And I get questions about why do you go that far to do that? Because it matters. It matters to that community. It matters to that individual professional. And by the way, let me give you a great story from Texas. As you know, the measles outbreak in the United States started in Texas. It started in the jurisdiction of somebody who runs a 4-county health department. And guess what? They're a registered sanitarian.
Oh,
That
wow.
person deserves our support.
Yes.
That person deserves access to the community of environmental health professionals so that they can make the best decisions possible for the constituents of that 4-county region. That's why we're so committed to the end of the road, because environmental health is the second largest part of the public health workforce. In many parts of Texas, it's only environmental health largely that's being conducted in those places. So when you say, and we go back to COVID, who's going to do this? Oh, public health will do it. Who in public health is going to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. And oftentimes it's environmental health professionals. A few years ago, I did an opioid session at the AEC. It was a last minute decision. We got a last minute speaker to come in from the local jurisdiction. And it was the last session before the closing. And Cameron, I was worried that the room was going to be empty.
I know that feeling going into those. Yeah.
Sir, I think the room sat 100. And I showed up because the person who spoke was there as a favor to me. And I was about to open the door and apologize to him for no one being in the room.
Yeah. Was it
and
packed?
standing room only. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Okay, so CEO's prerogative, why are you here? And the environmental health professional said, we do drug take back programs.
Uh-huh.
We do needle exchange programs.
Yeah.
We are the chief science officers for our communities. Who else is going to do this? So when this is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, when he had his radio programming, and the rest of the story is environmental health is public health for most of this country and frankly for most of the world.
That is absolutely so true. And also you're right. They just throw it on public health. Well, we want to we have to patrol the new EOs on, in-person dining or mask mandates. Give it to EH. They're already out in the field. They paid a price for that. We had, just working with so many departments, we had directors that had police protection outside their house. It really, far from being heralded as heroes, which they were and are, they got targeted heavily for it during that. You mentioned so NEHA, the conference is coming up. You mentioned the AEC session that you did on opiates. The conference is coming up. It's 14th through the 17th of July in Phoenix, and HS GovTech, who sponsors the podcast, will have a booth. But the podcast, if you don't mind me doing a shameless plug real quick, the Beyond Data Management podcast, separate from HS and the company's booths, will actually have a booth there. We're going to set up a remote camera setup in studio there, and we're going to be talking to and getting stories from environmental health folks there. So I always look forward to NEHA. It's one of the highlights of my calendar in the year, but definitely this year, because we're going to do some fun stuff, letting the community talk and tell their stories. It's one of the purposes of this podcast is, just like you packed that out, standing room only for that one. There's a dearth of good quality conversations and information out there for this community. Well, there's not a lot that's been promoted in traditional channels. Let me say it that way. There's a ton of info out there. And, we've been blown away. We had an episode recently has done over 100,000 views or listens. I think there's just a real demand. And I think your story about that standing room only at that is further evidence of people are hungry for real information and conversations about this. I don't want to let it go before I do want to talk about the conference. I don't want to miss that opportunity. Talk about the upcoming AEC 14th through the 17th of July in Phoenix. And I'll plug again, if you are not registered to go, I hope I'm not wrong. Sony from your organization might yell at me, but I think you can still register. And so I think it might cost a little more, but you should. You need to be there. There's going to be some great stuff. Talk about what you're looking forward to and maybe some of the things that you're focusing on for the AEC coming up in a couple months.
Well, I'm privileged. I get to travel the country quite a bit, but there are some individuals I haven't had a chance to talk to. And if they come to the AEC, look for me. I will take time to talk to you for sure. Coffee. For this upcoming conference, we have the number 2 person, Cesar, from McDonald's, that will be talking about corporate America and their role in retail food safety. And that promises to be really good. That's our opening speaker. The mayor of Phoenix is coming. We have one of the world's leading researchers on rats going to be jump-starting our educational programming. Bobby Corrigan, has been really running point on rodents for a very long time. And what we don't talk about is the rodent explosion that has occurred since COVID. And many grocery stores in the United States are trying to figure this out.
Really?
That's
something else you don't read in the news.
This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking. This profession is so cool. It is so interesting. And you don't read about this on the front page of the newspaper, but Bobby Corrigan, for folks that know rodent control, know his name, and he'll be speaking as well. And then we can't go to the Southwest without hearing from a elder from the tribal communities, from Native Americans, the wisdom of the ages in protecting and promoting the environment and its essential role in maintaining the health of the nation. And so we're going to close out the conference with an in-depth conversation with folks that have been caring for this country long before the Europeans arrived. And so from from door to door, this is going to be a dynamite program. We have, I think, a couple hundred different sessions planned. I'll be speaking at 3 or 4 of those. I have visitors coming from Europe to talk about mosquito control and some of the challenges that they're having there in that world. I mean, they have Aedes mosquito now in places like Norway.
What?
I mean, it's
Wow.
yeah.
It's changing everywhere.
It's everywhere. We have a very close working relationship with the Australians and their issues with bushfires and droughts and floods, because this is what comes with the current era. If you want the latest and the greatest in terms of practice and research, if you want things to take home with yourself to improve your own local environmental health program, whether you're in the public or private sector, Phoenix, the 14th to the 17th of July is the place to be.
It is. And again, be there. If you're not already planning it, hit up your director. I know budgets are tight sometimes, but even if you have to pay it out of your own pocket, it's worth it. It really, really, really is.
Can I give everyone a hint? If you look at the program carefully, you could probably plan your week to not pay for a meal.
You know what? That's I hadn't looked at it that way. But you're right.
You can do that. So I may regret saying that in a public forum, but I certainly say it privately. It's like, you don't even have to buy dinner if you look at the public programming and just make sure that you're in places where food is being served, meals are being served.
And the food is, and even during the day, the coffee and food breaks, they're great.
So we do that on purpose. If you go to the APHA conference, you don't even get a cup of coffee. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that.
It happens to be true, though. I've been there.
It's true. It's true. So at the NEHA conference, we have breaks. We have the social event, as you know, the last full night of the,
great.
And we're really proud of that. My mark of if it's a success or not is when the police come to me and say, "Please get these people out of here," because
I love that.
You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. It's like, to me, I know when the police come that we've had a successful program, because folks are so engaged with each other. They are connecting, they're talking, they're sharing ideas, and they're an hour overdue their next destination after 9 or 10 o'clock, whenever that event is complete.
Yes, actually, no, I laugh because it is funny, but you're right, that it actually means something if that happened, right? It means that the conversation was happening. That's amazing.
Yeah, and hopefully we created the conditions under which people feel comfortable doing that. I mean, ultimately, that's our job, is to create connection. Because if you have a problem and you can find somebody who's gone through the same thing and they can share insight and wisdom with you, that's what that conference is about. It's more than just the formal educational programming. And
we lost that for a couple of years during the pandemic. And the interesting thing is a lot of people have told me, because I see you a lot on the road at a lot of conferences in different states, and they actually took conferences to a degree for granted until they had to miss them in 2020, 2021. And this past couple of years, I've been told there's record attendance at a lot of the state conferences, all-time record, not just since the pandemic. I think the community is really been highlighted, the importance of it when we had to miss it for a couple of years. I also caught my attention, the guy from McDonald's that's going to be on. I'm going to definitely be in that keynote, because actually the episode after the one we're doing now, we actually are going to have, and it tells me, okay, Cameron, you guys are doing something borderline right, because NEHA is doing it bigger and better. We're having on the food safety directors from Texas Roadhouse and Chick-fil-A to talk about industry and their role in environmental health and ways that they could partner with departments. So I'll be really fascinated. McDonald's, that's a big get for to have at NEHA.
Yeah, so we're really pleased. I believe the action is in the space between the professions, and in this case, between the private sector and the public sector. And your organization and my organization need to work on creating the conditions where there's overlap between the two, because they both have the same mission.
They do.
And that is to protect the dining public. And I think we're sometimes perceived as being antithetical to that. It's not true. Let me be clear.
It's not.
No one wakes up in the morning. No one wakes up in the morning. We're going to shut these guys down.
You don't want to do that.
That's just not the way that thinks.
No, but where does that, obviously regulated, a little friction from time to time. That makes sense. But where does in some places, it's worse than others. I won't name names, but some states have had more of an issue with it. But where does that perception of its adversarial come from, and what could agencies at the local level be doing to help soften that? Because it is more partnership than it is adversarial, right?
Okay, so I think we need to understand human beings. For some people, control is important to them. And there was a saying, Cameron, and you know this one. When I got to NEHA, I was told, you can't do anything with this because the profession is male, pale, and stale.
Yep,
Okay.
I've heard. Yep.
And you've heard that. Today, that's not true. Today, the gender balance has swung in the exact opposite direction. 75% of undergraduates studying environmental sciences are women.
Wow.
When you move into the master's and doctoral levels, the numbers drop a little bit down to about 2/3. I'm not talking about the EHAC schools. I'm talking about the Council on Education for Public Health, CEF, schools. So the mass fraction of graduates or potential employees within environmental health, within, let's say, the regulatory universe, are women. And I think they're going to bring a different perspective to this. I think this educate over regulate perspective is changing. I believe as they have opportunities to ascend into leadership, and they already are there. And by the way, we have leadership training for women. We have programming right now that this spring on our web series. I think you're going to see that changing. And so I think some of these legacy reputations, we're going to have to address those head on, because I think a lot of, not all, but a lot of what you're describing is an artifact of the past.
It's like Bill Maher talks about zombie lies, right? It's almost like a zombie lie because it used to be true, but we've changed, but we still repeat the line. It's also getting younger, isn't it? I mean, I'm noticing that seem to be, and it's always hard to know exactly when you're at peak of something like this, but there seems to be a generational shift underway, especially in leadership at local department levels, where there's a lot of retirements and there's an old guard that is heading off to retire, and there's new younger leadership coming in, and that affects everything from view of technology to a ton of different areas. But do you see the same thing, or is that just in my head?
So I think you're observing accurately. Our membership data suggests that we are becoming a more female-dominated profession, and certainly our members, as they report their ages, and they don't have to, but when they do, clearly the average age of our membership is going down.
Yeah.
Right. So the profession is changing. You talked about AI. We're talking about cultivating the next generation of women leaders. It's important that they are successful. And I'm asking myself as CEO of NEHA, what types of policies and HR systems should we have in place to be role models for that profession? And so it's not just an abstract question you're asking. It's one that I personalize at the individual association level.
That's remarkable. And thank God for strong women, right? I think as anybody who's married, more women generally coming into a profession is a good thing for it. And it did used to be male dominated. How long has that transition been underway? Again, it's hard to know peak of, is this a longer trend or is this more recent, the gender flip?
So there's a tapering effect going on with men, and it's not just in environmental health. It's men are less inclined to go to college, and that's true if you look at medicine and engineering and dentistry and pharmacy and other health and scientific professions. That's disturbing, to be candid with you. I also find that the racial distribution of the workforce that attend the conferences, this is just my observation, it's not scientific, particularly on the coast, there's a highly eclectic collection of people that attend those conferences, and that diversity I think is a really good thing. The different perspectives that are brought in, the different languages that are employed during inspections and regulatory activities is really valuable. And so
Hmm.
for folks that can speak Spanish or speak Mandarin or speak, Kiswahili, you'll find a part of the United States where that's really valuable. And
Hmm.
so it is the diversity of the workforce that makes it strong and potentially much more effective at its mission.
Yeah. What would you say? Speaking about getting younger, and maybe there's a young man watching this, although anyone, and they're not in environmental health, but they're like, because by the way, you make a beautiful case for, because it is exciting. It never is the same day twice. It's never a dull moment. And you've just made a beautiful case for it. So if somebody's listened up to this point, they're like, well, maybe they have a science degree. Maybe they're not chosen what they're going to do yet. What would you tell somebody who wants to potentially explore it, and about how they might go about furthering that potential exploration, and seeing if this is the right passion for them?
So if you're a young person or earlier in your career, uh, and you're still looking at your options, a great place to start is local governmental environmental health. And don't try to become the health official in your first week. Please don't do that. I started this conversation with you saying I spent 4 years
In
in
the
the
field,
field
yeah.
collecting data.
Yeah, you were doing sample collection, and
Sir, I I could tell you stories about rats. I can tell you stories about mole crickets. I can tell you stories about people using intravenous drugs in the workplace where I happen to be supervising asbestos related work. Uh, but man, not only do I have an encyclopedia of stories, none of which we've really unpacked on this discussion, but I learned about life and I learned about the public health profession and I learned it from the people living their lives around me. And I would encourage, to answer your question, go work in a local health department. You don't, if it's the pace is too slow for you, then move on. But what you'll learn in a couple, 3 years in public service in a local governmental environmental health program will stay with you for the rest of your life.
yes.
You will drink deeply from that experience, I promise you, for the rest of your life, whether you go into policy, whether you go into law, whether you go into medicine, it will stay with you. That's how profound those experiences are. Listen, I've been to about 70, probably 80 countries in my work, and I can tell you something I learned in every place.
Yeah.
And mostly it was from people that were impoverished and the innovation that they used to survive. It just, it's embarrassing to me. Like here I'm Mr. Educated, but I learned from them. And so bring that learning spirit, and this profession can offer you so much.
Cameron Garrison here. We'll get you right back to the video in a minute on the Beyond Data Management channel. Want to take a moment to thank the sponsor and underwriter of the entire channel on all platforms, HS GovTech, the creators of HS Cloud Suite, which is the preeminent platform for data management for over 1,000 health departments around the country, whether it's permits, inspections, complaints, or disclosure online to citizens and the public. It's all in HS Cloud Suite, and it's more affordable than you might think. Again, special thanks to HS GovTech for sponsoring the Beyond Data Management podcast, allowing us to bring the stories of environmental health to all of you in the community. Now back to the video. Is that experience, for you said you learned from them? You are an optimistic, happy warrior. Did it bring a sense of gratitude to see those situations and see just how really fortunate we are, even with all the problems we have? Like, how did those experiences and learning from places that most people would think have nothing to teach affect your outlook in the way you take on every day?
So I worked in the Congo, what's referred to as the Kivus in the eastern portion of DRC,
Wow.
Democratic Republic of Congo, after the Rwanda genocide.
Yeah, that's a rough neighborhood.
Sir, that is a very rough neighborhood. And coming out of that experience, you can't look at the world the same way. And when you see mothers raising their children successfully in those environments, it gives you a sense of, if that woman can do that there, how dare I bitch or moan or whine
Yeah. Yeah.
about anything, anything remotely like that. We get upset over my laptop isn't working or Zoom
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
connected. It's like
Yeah.
these folks don't know if literally, and I'm going to be direct with you, they don't know if they're going to be raped that night
Wow.
by army men that come over the border. That's the kind of environment that they exist in, and it's awful. That's my definition of hell. But through that hell, you come to appreciate and enjoy more. And frankly, it refilled my well of commitment to humanity. And like that exists. I can't fix the world's woes, but maybe I could fix one or two smaller ones.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's, it's really it's inspirational
Yeah.
to be in those environments. And I really consider myself fortunate.
There's a kind of say in jest that a lot of people do, oh, first world problem, but actually, you actually have observed true non first world problems, and it does make a lot of ours pale in comparison. That's really
Yeah, yeah,
deep.
but let me say that a child of an American may be more fortunate, but that is still precious to those parents.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
just like that child in Ethiopia is precious to their parents. And I think that's my message is we all have a lot more in common than we have differences in the planet.
What was it that JFK Kennedy said in that famous speech? We all cherish our children's future and the air we breathe. We share the same planet. It's basically
so,
a more detailed version that you're basically getting at there.
and yeah, and he said it much better than I ever could. But yeah, so that's what I take away from this. It's interacting with people like you who just I've never seen you frown. And I'm like, I wonder where that comes from. Like, is it nature or nurture? And so
Yeah.
this is the nature of public health, man. It's so interesting. And for a young person getting into a career, consider yourself fortunate and go with a learning spirit, and you will forever be thankful for that decision.
Well said. So you teased it. So I'm not putting you on the spot. We do with a lot of guests, story time, so to speak. And you teased a couple that sound like Hall of Famers. So do you mind taking a couple minutes and talking about some of the stories that you had, that you mentioned? Because you have done so many things. Your stories probably span a ton of different practices.
Now, this is embarrassing. I'll share one from Ethiopia, which shows how silly I am when I think I know something. Uh, we work to support a hospital in Wolega, which is a rural part of Ethiopia. And one of the things that I noticed in my time there is that they had a very high mortality rate for children under the age of 5. And is looking at the conditions of the community, the village surrounding the hospital, what I saw was that people cooked indoors. And so the
Mm.
smoke would collect inside the huts. And so I went with my fancy industrial hygiene equipment. I think I was one of the first people on the planet to do this. And I used occupational health sampling methods to assess exposures to wood smoke inside of African huts. This was a long time ago. And I mean, of course, it was unbelievably how high those concentrations in milligrams per cubic meter of the airborne dust was. Clearly, it would compromise what's referred to as the mucociliary escalator, the lungs, the cleaning capacity of the lungs, which would probably lead someone to potentially be at risk of death from pulmonary disease, which is what we were seeing in the kids there. And so yours truly is like, hey, what we're going to do is introduce a cook stove program where mothers will have these fancy little cook stoves. They can still use biomass, grass, and sticks to cook on, but it will be outdoors, or we'll make a little chimney for them. Are you with me so far?
Yeah.
And so I developed this
Sounds
intervention.
like problem solved on paper.
Yeah, so it was hilarious. So I did this and left and came back like 6 months later, and all the cook stoves were kicked outside, not being used. And I was like, what? So here's what happened. these ladies trusted me. They used their cook stoves. And because there was no smoke inside their huts, cicadas came and ate their roofs.
Really?
Okay,
So
are you with
the
me?
secondary impact of the smoke was to keep the cicadas off.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
yes.
wow.
So the smoke kept the cicadas from eating the thatch.
Wow.
And they're like, we would rather have smoke than have holes in the roof. And, it's a pain in the butt to replace those roofs and maybe even expensive. I don't know. So when it rains, and of course they have a rainy season, the rain would come in. And you don't want your family to be wet inside of these these
No.
huts. I so that's an example of just beware of trying to do good things unless you really understand the ripple effect of that. I was not a mean-spirited person, but I thought I was being helpful, and ultimately I wasn't.
Did they discover though that the smoke kept the cicadas off, or is this knowledge and
Yeah,
information they knew
no,
before, or did that
well,
reveal the problem?
I think the latter. I think no one ever said to me, that smoke will keep the bugs away. But
So
what they,
unintended consequences.
yeah, unintended consequences. And so this is what we need. The unintended consequences of social distancing and closing schools is what we're seeing in the US today, with the perception of public health interfering with individual freedoms and tampering with the marketplace. Are you with me?
Yep.
So this pattern of this kind of thing exists. I'll share one other story if you've got another minute or
Oh, of
two. And
course.
okay, so I've been speaking recently about my experience in Teller, Alaska. We had a student placed in Nome, an intern, and I went up to visit the host before the program got started for that student. And they asked me if I wanted to go to Teller, a indigenous community of about 200 people, 75 miles north of Nome, Alaska. We went, I think, in the month of May or June, just before the summer solstice. And I was stunned. This is 2024. I was stunned at what I saw, Cameron. Um, the effects of poverty and climate change combined had just devastated that community. They were in a staged retreat from the shore because of the violent storms and the inundation of the coastline with water. The fishing populations had changed dramatically. They were subsistence fishers and hunters. The entire ecosystem and the wildlife that they've survived on is either moved on or gone extinct. And there's no toilets there in the traditional sense that they use what are referred to as honey buckets or buckets to collect human waste.
Wow.
And those buckets line the streets of like everywhere. People with money can afford to get rid of them. If you can't afford to get rid of them, you just stick them outside.
Seriously?
Yes, sir. I could go on. I
Wow.
think you get the point, though.
Yeah.
This is the US. This is not, I mean, you could say, oh, this is a developing country somewhere in the southern hemisphere. This is the United States. And I was appalled, and frankly, I'm still kind of stunned by that. Like, wh how did we get to this place where our own people are literally living in filth? This is a very proud community, a community that historically had supported themselves, but because of government policies are stuck in one place being versus being able to migrate to follow game or to follow fish. And so uh, it just shows to me the importance of public health. How is it that we in public health have been unable to communicate to decision makers to take
Mm.
the climate crisis more seriously?
Eh,
It is heartbreaking. Asheville is heartbreaking.
yes, yeah, just
Okay.
2 hours from where I'm sitting right now,
Yeah,
and it.
sir, that's real. Teller, Alaska, let me tell you, is real. The Palisades in California
Yeah.
are real. Maui, Hawaii is a real place. These are real people living real lives that have been affected. Now, what we need to do in public health, in my opinion, is to not talk about broad cosmic kinds of crises. I don't think that's helpful. Remember, environmental health is profoundly local. our messaging and the support that we give and the solutions that we tender have to be good for people that are living busy lives. They have to be suitable for moms and dads who want to do the right thing, but when they hear about this catastrophic developments, they don't know what to do or how they can help. And to say eat lower on the food chain, or I mean, that doesn't mean anything to them. So
Yeah.
we in public health have to make it real. We have to start where people are, not where we
And
are.
you hit on
And
something huge there because you said people are busy. People are, and they're under strain, right? Like you're
yes,
running. You get contradictory news when you do pay attention to some news. And if you're worrying about, rent or the mortgage, next month, in addition to work and kids and everything, you don't have time to fully educate yourself. And I think a lot of times people who are experts on things discount that fact, don't they? And that's part of how you don't meet somebody where they are, is you assume they know a bunch of stuff that they don't have time to have even thought about.
right. Well, I'll agree and disagree with you. I agree in your basic precept. Where I'll disagree is, everyone in this country, with few exceptions, understands science. They
Hmm.
understand risk. They understand these things. We should not make the mistake of saying, well, they won't understand this. They do understand it. They just have different priorities.
That's
If
a
they
way
have,
better way to say it, right? They're coming
they,
at it with a different priority set.
yeah. So uh, I see this through the eyes of people that live in Teller. I see it through the eyes of people that live in Asheville. I see it through the eyes of people that lived in Maui. But most Americans don't have that privilege. They're like, I got to get my kid to school
Yeah.
today and their homework done tonight. And I have an electric bill. What kind of country is this where we turn off electricity and water if you don't pay the bill? I mean, this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
my liberal leanings are beginning to ooze into this conversation. But I think, frankly, if some of those burdens were off the shoulders of average everyday people like you and me, then maybe they'd have the mind space to talk about some more of these more complex things, because they certainly are bright enough and they certainly understand science and risk.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
but
bandwidth is
that
just not there.
correct. And let's start where they are. Let's understand their challenges. Let's understand their feelings and their emotions. And then there's something we used to talk about when I was an educator, about a teachable moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with affect heuristics. For somebody to change their mind on something, they have to be in the same emotional state they were in when they first came to their initial,
Hmm.
opinion. And I think there's no amount of repeating data that's going to change anybody's mind. If you think I'm wrong, just look at recent history.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we're tribal by nature, right? I think what's so interesting the last few years is how no matter how sophisticated we think we've gotten, still very, very tribal.
Oh, listen, we are human beings. We are genetically constructed to connect. And listen, I think it's important that we recognize that people read our body language faster than we can talk. To be clear, folks are looking at what I'm wearing. They're looking at the fan. They're looking at the pictures and maybe the degrees in the back. They may be listening less to what I'm saying and paying more attention to other stimulus.
So
So
true.
when we as environmental health professionals dress in the morning, please understand the reaction you get when you come to the door. If you're a regulator or an educator, frankly, people have already made an opinion about you before you even open your mouth.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so what I'm saying is factual. Okay,
It
it's
is.
factual. And so the way you dress matters.
Yeah.
The way you carry yourself matters. All of this matters. The way you make eye contact or don't make eye contact, it matters. The way you hold your feet, believe it or not, matters, because subconsciously humans are reading other humans. And this goes back to what you said around tribalism. we are tribal by nature. Our professions are tribal, and our communities are tribal as well.
Yep, it's true. So I don't want to let it wrap up. You said something. It's the most concise analysis, in my opinion, that I've heard, because you summarized it in like 4 or 5 words. We got the rap through COVID of being against freedom and against business. And you said, like, until we face or deal with that. And how do you go about what is your thought on how do you go back and deal with, no, that's a misperception. We weren't ever against your freedom. We're not against your businesses. Is there a way, or is it one of those things that's almost impossible to put a prescription on?
Okay, so I'm going to be pie in the sky here. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You do it one relationship at a time. And I spoke at the Preparedness Summit, the NATO Preparedness Summit a few weeks ago in San Antonio. And this was part of the plenary. And I asked individuals in the room, ostensibly all from public health or emergency preparedness, how many of you have had a class in relationship building or trust?
Nobody.
Yeah, exactly. And no, there was one hand or two hands in the back. And then someone approached me afterwards and said, actually, our program supports that. We need to, as a profession, go back to basics and build trust. We need to show up before the emergency. We need to have relationships with the press before we need them.
Yeah.
We need to be at schools and hospitals and daycares. We need to show up in places and develop those relationships and trust. And we need to do it locally and then build up from there versus from the top down.
And it's so true what you said about media. Also, I think, especially in departments that are in larger media markets, media training of some sort is never a terrible idea. But you're right. If you don't have a relationship and a give and take with them until they're chasing a story that you want to be able to help mold a little bit, you're kind of behind the 8 ball hopelessly, aren't you?
Yeah. So we at NEHA have changed our approach. I don't know if you're aware of it. Starting in January of this year, we kind of cleaned the slate and started over again. And do you know, in the first 3 months of 2025, get this, Cameron, we had over 5 billion, with a B as in Bravo, 5 billion media impressions.
Wow. That's a huge change from NEHA historically.
Sir, and we did it through discipline and science and relationship building. And we didn't set out for 5 billion. We set out to be thought leaders in the profession. And we just employed a different approach. I'm not suggesting we'll have 5 billion or more in the second quarter, because we had some really interesting opportunities with global newspapers and journals, which may not repeat themselves. But we learned in a very important lesson, and that is, when the press calls, pick up the phone.
Talk. Yeah.
Okay. Well, because most everyone's like, I'm so busy. I'm like, you're not too busy
to get your message out.
This is your job. This is your job, is to describe why this profession is so important. Because my guess is you're busy every day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But are you too busy to take a call from the press? And the answer is no. And that's what we've been doing. We have been
so smart.
saying, we don't have time not to answer your question. And it's funny, those reporters come back to us.
Yes, the reporters by definition are, all humans, let's change that, are a little lazy. So, right, if you have a good relationship with a good source or expert, yeah, you'll get hit back up a lot, for sure. And actually, I don't know if this one, it was actually, I think I've actually seen some of those. I have some of those impressions from media. I don't know if this is one in the 5 billion or not, but I had read an article recently that you were quoted and interviewed extensively in for The Observer, about PFAS chemicals. And I thought it was interesting because it's again, that's not the first thing a lot of people would think about with NEHA and environmental health, but I thought it was a really interesting article, and actually I think we've got it up on the screen now. Removing the forever chemicals in water could make it a lot more expensive, and Dr. Dyjack, it's worth a read. We'll post that link in the description for this episode. Maybe just talk to us a little bit about that, because I thought it was a pretty interesting article. And how big of a problem is PFAS?
So these endocrine disruptors are a real problem. There's microplastics, there's PFAS, there's a variety of other forever substances that regretfully have found their way into groundwater, which is the primary source of drinking water for most Americans. We need to figure out a way to remove PFAS from drinking water for most people. And is it a major problem? Well, you and I are natural experiments. If we were to sample our adipose tissue, Cameron, I bet we have PFAS. Is it a big deal? Potentially. Let's wait 20, 30 years and see how this generation ages out in some of the concerns that are alleged to be associated with PFAS, whether or not they show up.
So we're literally all guinea pigs in a long form trial to some degree with this.
So I think what your question's really important, and I think I just kind of muddled the answer. The synergistic effects of all of these low-level contaminants, we don't know what the epigenetic consequences are. Like, how is our very DNA potentially being changed, and what are we passing down to our kids? Is the obesity epidemic possibly partially explained by these chemicals that are in our drinking water? And I'm being quite serious. So this is why having a very strong public health research agenda and practitioners is critical to the health and safety of the country in this era.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll teach you one more time with it. You said you had rat stories, and you said that plural.
Yeah. That's true.
As we get ready to wrap up here the next couple of minutes, is there one that you think, hey, I've got to share it? And if not, that's fine too.
So let me share this one. I was the supervisor over the health team looking at asbestos removals in occupied apartments in the greater Washington, D.C. metroplex. And as part of my job, I needed to crawl under two contiguous sections of an apartment block. And I mean, so in other words, I was in a crawl space, maybe 18 inches tall, and I had to go slide along my belly looking for potential asbestos. And, there's all kinds of bones of things that have died under these apartment buildings, yada, yada. And I had my flashlight. I'm crawling on my stomach. The only exit out was behind me, 50 feet, 75 feet. And I could see a light panel in front of me, like 100 feet away at the far end of this building. And I'm on my stomach crawling with my flashlight. And I got up to the light panel. And I thought it was maybe like resistors or something. and I put my flashlight up. And all those pink things were eyes of rats.
Oh, and you thought it was like a strip of lights. Oh my god!
Well, I thought it was like have you ever seen these panels that kind of glow a little bit? I mean, they're
they have like the little LED sensors and things. Yeah.
I thought that's what I was looking at.
Oh man!
And I was face to face with a whole wall of rats, all looking at me. They were lined up this is a true story, single file, all looking at me, and I'm like.
And you can't run because you're on your belly in a crawl space.
I'm on my belly. Oh my god! I mean, I was like, I don't know if you've ever had like the bile come up and like. Oh!
Yes.
I was like, oh dear God, right? And to this day, man, I was like, what was that movie, Ben? The rat movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was like, is this my Ben moment? Right? It's like, oh. I got out of there.
That's horrible.
Oh, it was because you don't want to turn around and who knows what they're doing behind you, right?
Yeah. No, you don't leave a wall of rats behind you.
That is a true story. That
is crazy.
it was that era. And I remember when I finally got out, I think I was shaking. I was like, oh God.
Yeah, that'll leave you rattled for a bit. Also, you could dream about that. That is
That's
that's rough.
Sir, I haven't told that story in years. That one was pretty darn creepy. And under those apartments, they have these mole crickets. Have you ever seen a mole cricket?
I don't know if I have or not.
Google that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening in today, Google mole cricket. They are about as ugly as an insect gets. And to have them like jumping around near your face,
I'm actually Googling it right now. I'm leaning over to the computer. Oh my gosh, it looks like a spider to and that is a gross looking bug.
They are those and rats. Oh man.
Oh man. And where are those indigenous to? Mole crickets.
Those are why did you have to do that to me?
There it is. Yes, David, you're the best in the control room. So that is a mole cricket, right? So for those that are on the YouTube channel, you're seeing this very not beautiful bug right now. And if you're on the Spotify or the audio only apps, count yourself lucky. So where is that bug indigenous to? Is it? I've never seen one.
That was in Washington, D.C.
So it's everywhere.
I don't know. I could tell you the name of the apartment block they were under. I'm assuming that they're still there.
And I guess there wasn't enough asbestos to keep the rat population at bay either.
Sir, there were a lot of hazards under that building. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, asbestos wasn't their only problem. That is an awesome story. So as we, first of all, thank you for doing this. I know we went a bit longer than an hour, but you make the case beautifully. And I think this is I think you would agree with this. Like NEHA's providing moral, brave, like calling balls and strikes leadership through the craziness, right? And I just think it's refreshing for folks in the industry, especially it's been a tough few years. I think it's just refreshing for them to hear just how much thought and perspective and even-handedness is at their six through NEHA and the work that you're doing there. Is there anything that we've missed that's on your mind, or do you think is an emergent or pressing that we haven't talked about that you'd like to?
Can I leave you with a quote?
Absolutely.
This quote comes from the psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She also wrote some books. She was a Swiss psychiatrist who emigrated to the U.S. And she said, people are like stained glass windows. They sparkle and shine when the sun is out. But when the darkness sets in, their true beauty is revealed only if there is a light from within.
Oh, wow.
And that is your association, NEHA, is trying to be that stained glass window in the darkness that often envelops public health locally or nationally. We want to support you for all the right reasons. We want to do it in all the right ways. We often fail and fall short. It's not because we're not trying. We're just not perfect. But we want to be that stained glass window that you admire when it's dark all around and you see the beating light of our profession within NEHA as an association. And I would like to leave you with those sentiments, Cameron.
It's really, really great. I can't add or improve that. A thought leader's thought leader, Dr. David Dyjack. And I hope that anytime if there's something you guys are working on or you want to talk about, just let us know, and the floor is yours. And I hope you'll come back. And if I don't see you before, which I may not because we're getting to the summer here, I'm looking forward to seeing you. And folks, I don't want to put pressure on you if you're not going to wear them this year, but Dr. Dyjack has the best collection of bow ties that he's just, it's worth going to NEHA just to see which bow tie he's going to wear the different days. They really are phenomenal. And you're also, see, I can't pull it off, Dr. Dyjack, I can't. But you also are one of those people that can pull a bow tie off, right? I look almost like a caricature of myself when I try it.
Stop it. Well, I will certainly be wearing my bow ties in Phoenix. I hope to see everybody there. Cameron, it's a privilege to join you this afternoon, and Godspeed in all your endeavors with the podcast.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us. And of all of you all, thanks for joining us. We will put how you can reach Dr. Dyjack in the description for the episode on all the platforms. We'll put a link to their site, a link to how you can join NEHA. You should if you haven't. And we will also, if we'll see if he'd like us to, we can also put a link to where that QR code is that'll help you generate a letter to Washington about certain things so that we can let people know certain things or maybe a bad idea to cut, etc. So, and if you have any comments for us, you can comment on the video. Please like and subscribe. As silly as that sounds, the algorithm, it actually, when you do that, it finds other environmental health professionals and puts it into their feed. So if you don't mind, do that little bit of business under the video. And you can email us with questions, comments, show ideas, etc. Beyond at hscloudsuite.com, beyond at hscloudsuite.com. Special thanks to Dr. David Dyjack, the CEO and director of NEHA. And for all of us here at the Beyond Data Management podcast, thanks to David Stiles in the control room. I'm Cameron Garrison. Thanks so much for spending an hour plus with us, and we'll see you next week.